Welcome to The Digital Footprint, a podcast for leaders in healthcare, public health, and education who are looking to leverage technology to solve problems and make a big impact. In each episode, we interview innovators and entrepreneurs who are solving the most challenging problems facing these industries. Join us as we dig into the colossal tasks involved in bringing a new digital product to life. Welcome to The Digital Footprint.
Okay, hello, and welcome to The Digital Footprint. I'm Richard Sims, and this podcast is brought to you by Tyrannosaurus Tech, an award-winning technology partner dedicated to designing and developing high-impact software products. All right, I'm really excited about this conversation today. This is episode number 2 of The Digital Footprint. We're starting to get a hang of things in this podcasting world. And we've got a great guest today, Jack Griffin, founder and CEO of FoodFinder. Jack, thanks for joining us.
Of course. No, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I've known you for a couple years now, I think, Jack, and you're doing some really amazing stuff with FoodFinder. It's really important work, especially now with COVID. It's that much more crucial for folks. And it's also just a great story, the organization, how you, came to start it and kind of that journey you've been through. So before we even launched the podcast, I knew that at some point we would want to have you on as a guest. So I'm glad that we're having this opportunity. So first, just to kind of set the stage a little bit, in a minute or so, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about FoodFinder and what you all do?
Yeah, of course. So as you said before, my name is Jack Griffin. I'm the founder and CEO of FoodFinder, which is a national nonprofit organization that uses both its website, foodfinder.us, and our mobile app, FoodFinder-Fighting Hunger, as a means to show low-income and food-insecure families across the country precisely when and where to get help from their closest food pantry or school meal provider. So, our goal is, for as long as we've been around, has been to connect the people looking for help with the places that offer it. As you touched on, that has never been more relevant than it is right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. So happy to expand on what we've been doing for the last year or so, later in the conversation. But yeah, that's the high-level overview.
Awesome. That's a great intro. And yeah, I know it's been an especially busy year for you all, and definitely admire you all stepping up to try to meet the need as much as possible. So one thing I really admire about you, Jack, is, as far as some of the origin story, I know you started FoodFinder when you were pretty young. I think you were still in high school, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's been a minute.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, not many high schoolers are thinking about big problems like this, and obviously food insecurity is a huge, complicated problem across the U.S. And of course, not many high schoolers are trying to tackle that and starting their own nonprofit. So can you tell us just a little bit more about the origin story? How did FoodFinder get started?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, it was a problem I really stumbled into. So, back then it was 2013. Now it will actually be 8 years ago in this coming March. Back then I was a sophomore in high school here in the metro Atlanta area. And one night before school, I was watching a news story that was showcasing how, especially at the time, 2013, we were coming out of the Great Recession. The economy was improving after the financial crisis. And this story was talking about how even though the recovery was taking place, the people who were being left behind in that recovery were the folks who were the hardest hit to begin with. And that included low-income families and children and parents who were struggling with hunger and homelessness. So, there I was, 14 years old at the time, and I was literally watching kids, exactly my age, who were getting ready for school in the bathrooms of libraries and gas stations. And it was just showing the stark reality for what in truth was the reality for tens of millions of families and individuals across America at the time, and still to this day. But it just shattered my ignorance as to how bad things really were, but also how invisible these problems really also were for folks who were not directly affected by them, like myself. So I was like, all right, fired up. I was like, I know, that this is a problem now. I want to do something about it. So the light bulb didn't go off right away. I was like, all right, well, where can I volunteer? Where can I, spend some hours over the weekend? Where can I donate some cans of food to? Something, like that to do my small part. And it was then in that ensuing search of like, well, I don't know where to go to help out. So, off to Google we go of, trying to find food pantries near me or shelters near me where I could volunteer. And it was that online search for these agencies that opened my eyes to the fact that it's really difficult to find food pantries in America and to find these social service providers online through just the digital means that you and I may be accustomed to, but it more and more so that the low-income folks who are in need of this assistance are turning to as well. So, I just asked myself, if I was a regular kid having this much trouble finding these food pantries, what if I was like the kids in that news story who might have been using a school computer to try and find where to get help with food if they didn't have meals waiting for them over the weekend, over a holiday break or over summer. So that didn't sit well with me. And then just, fast forward a little over a year later in 2014, FoodFinder was born with a couple dozen food pantries in our database serving Gwinnett County, Georgia, and the families who live there.
Awesome. Yeah, it's such a great story, and kudos to you for having the maturity at that age to kind of wrap your head around this problem and, really empathize. I think that's so huge. And similarly, I think growing up, I was very ignorant of this reality and folks that, are really hurting. It's a little counterintuitive in the U.S. because, we have such excess in some ways, but obviously there are lots of folks that, are struggling to find a meal, and that is, really hard to stomach, no pun intended, right? So I think it's awesome what you all are doing. So after you all started, you obviously continued through high school, college. Now you're able to do FoodFinder full time, which is awesome. What was it like when you were still a student trying to balance your course load and pursuing FoodFinder? That must have been challenging itself.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And especially like when I was at school at the University of Michigan, some people would ask me that, like, how do I balance really two full-time commitments between FoodFinder and my studies? And it was like, I'll let you know when I figure it out. And then I graduated and then just did it full time. So I don't think I really ever figured it out, but I did my best the whole way through. It was just, especially in high school, it was just, I had zero, inkling as to, what I was doing or, the best way to, like, I don't know how to create a website from scratch, or certainly not, a situation like FoodFinder where, can't go to Wix or anything like that, truly, create a new tool, a web application for use by, children who might be on pre-introduced lunch, their parents, or especially, a tool that could be used by teachers and counselors to help the students that they know don't have food waiting for them at home. So I think that blank slate early on was actually really helpful, trying to leave as many, preconceived notions or biases at the door, to just try and be as brutally honest with myself as possible, and to be as fair to the people we're trying to help as possible, to make sure that we're creating something that is actually needed and would actually be used by the folks we're just trying to, offer a lending hand, a helping hand to. And then, later on in college, it was actually really fortunate to where, at least, especially when I was an upperclassman, like my junior and senior year of my time at Michigan, half of my time, or really half of my classes were, it was split 50-50 between the business school and the School of Social Work there. So by the time I was an upperclassman, virtually all of the actual courses that I was enrolled in were directly applicable to my work with FoodFinder, either from leading business, from the business side, or from a more clinical social work perspective, how learning to responsibly serve entire communities. Couldn't have asked for really a better combination of skills, tools to add to my toolkit that would, especially by the time I was ready for graduation, that would make that leap to, after 5 or 6 years, finally jumping into the role of a full-time founder, devoting 100% of my time and energy towards our cause. I was really well equipped to take that next step.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't necessarily realize that when you were in college, you were taking that directly relevant coursework. And I bet that was really interesting. I mean, I think back personally, if I could go back and take some of those business courses now, how much more engaged I would be just with some real world applications. So I'm sure that, even compared to other students going through that coursework, you probably were absorbing so much more because you could put it into action. So that's great. So one question I had, I mean, you answered this to a degree earlier. It sounds like pretty quickly you kind of realized that technology was going to play a big role in FoodFinder, right? So I want to hear a little bit more about that journey, because it sounds like you weren't necessarily, super tech savvy. You weren't a developer, right? And so that's kind of whole new terrain to jump into. What was that process like at that age, kind of trying to figure out what direction to go to bring it to life?
Yeah, it was really I'd say it was the sort of the two halves. First, even identifying, is technology the right way to go about solving this problem that I identified of, sort of the more specifically within, of course, the broader issue of food insecurity and hunger. Is technology the right way to go about solving the information gap, between the people looking for help and the places that offer it, A, and then B, actually, if it is the right way to go about it, how do you create it? What's the implementation look like, and how do you get the money to do it? Because certainly, I am not the one slinging lines of code behind FoodFinder. I am a very non-technical founder. So if we work with, a software development partner here in Atlanta, who do we, go to? Who's in our budget? How can we sort of communicate all the things that we know to be true about, the problem we're trying to solve? How do we respect the user, their dignity and privacy above all else as we develop the tool, and things like that. So, I think to the first part, we were seeing that, and of course now you have several years into FoodFinder, we have all the historical data of actually, thanks to Google Keyword Planner, we have a very clear snapshot of the digital demand for information on food pantries here in the U.S. So as an example, now of course that hindsight is 2020, but to give you a sense of even how, since FoodFinder has since we launched, what that increase in demand has looked like. In 2015, even after FoodFinder's the first version of our website was live, about 400,000 people across the country used Google to search for food pantries near me, food pantries in my area, things to that effect, for where to get help with food near them. And the data for December 2020 is still being calculated as we speak, but it will likely end up being north of 6 million people in 2020 that use those same search terms to try and find help for food assistance. And even before COVID, it was around 4 million in 2019. So already a tenfold increase in the span of 5 years. And of course, the demand is higher than ever because of how dire things are because of the pandemic. Technology, as we like to say, it's no longer a luxury. Smartphones are just a necessity to live in today's connected world. And thanks to federal programs, thanks to nonprofit initiatives, people can get, even at the grocery store, at supermarkets, there are really decent smartphones, Android devices that are available for $20, $15, $10, or even free through certain programs. So a lot of times the technology itself, the device isn't the issue. It's what comes after of the information, what's available, because people can only get help from the places that they know about. And that's where we come in, and that's where we want to really streamline that process. And for families who have enough to worry about, we want to make this as hoop-free process for them as possible.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of good tidbits there. First of all, I just appreciate that you kind of distinguished early on between, is technology even the right solution here? And, even for us working in technology and being the folks that build applications, I feel like we often kind of have those conversations, hopefully in a healthy way, where, a lot of folks, and I understand, but kind of just have this feeling that a mobile app, for example, is the answer and is a cure-all. And, we know that's not true. A lot of times there's low tech or no tech ways to solve problems, and you don't want to build something if folks aren't going to use it, right? So I appreciate you kind of highlighting that distinction. And then what I also liked that you had said, and this is something that I think we've learned a lot about in the last couple of years just related to public health. Of course, there's really sophisticated applications of technology, and I think FoodFinder has become a sophisticated offering. But a lot of times, it's also just, like you said, getting information out there. It's just bringing that together in a place where people can find it and be educated, on whatever that is, food pantries or, hand washing best practices or whatever it is. That's what I've thought is really exciting about some of the technology and public health that we've explored. It's just getting folks the information they need in a format that works for them. So I think that's really cool. You don't have to necessarily create something that's a $1 million product to accomplish some of these initiatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. And simplicity has really been the name of the game for us. As soon as you open, FoodFinder today, of course, you see that it's just, we default to using your current location. So just show where you are and the locations of where all the nearby food pantries, soup kitchens, or school meal places are nearby. And that's really it. And again, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to throw more money or food at the issue of hunger. Because it's really well established at this point that we have enough food to feed everyone. We just need to make sure it ends up in the right hands. We need to make sure it isn't wasted all throughout the supply chain. And especially for the work that we do for the 60,000 food pantries that are operating in America today, we want to make sure that as many people who are in need of their services as possible know about them. And especially when we're operating at the scale that FoodFinder is at now, we can even help evenly distribute the demand to make sure that any one provider isn't overloaded. We just want to make sure that we can raise the utilization of all the services and all the great and terrific and vitally needed emergency help that's already being offered is there and is taken advantage of.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think there's obviously so many good things you can do with that data, and I know you all are leaning into that, so I think that's really exciting. One thing I know you've said to me in the past, which I really appreciated, is that you kind of approach FoodFinder with more of a startup mentality, right, as a nonprofit, which, I think is really interesting. And I think when you started FoodFinder, obviously on the whole, you're younger than most entrepreneurs and have a good fresh perspective. Can you expand upon just kind of that mentality and how you think that affects your day-to-day and the organization's trajectory?
Yeah, it wasn't, and that's a great point, because I think sometimes how I phrase it is FoodFinder really being having the body of a startup, but the heart of a nonprofit. For something like that, it sounds nice, but it really wasn't so much, an infatuation with startup culture and like startup life. It was sort of more like, honestly, an early on aversion to the not so great things that I sort of learned the hard way and learned very early on about the nonprofit world. The fact that it's very fragmented, the fact that there's still the really unfortunate paradigm that it's like, a lot of people see it, as a zero-sum game. So like if you're in it, very little collaboration that takes place. If you get, so-and-so's grant money, then that's coming out of my pocket. And things like that. They're just really, counterintuitive and counterproductive, especially if we're sort of organizations of similar, if not the same mission. If we're trying to help the same people,
Right.
then we really should find a way to work together. And I think the needle definitely is moving in the right direction to more and more people, recognizing that these mentalities are an issue, and that we're heading in the right way of of where we can go from here. But yeah, in terms of FoodFinder itself being run like a startup, when it comes to financially, of course, the more money we have at our disposal, and of course, the more ways in which we can generate our own revenue, through a social enterprise model, the more financially independent we are, the more sustainable we are, and the longer we can be in operations, so we can help more people than we would otherwise. If obviously, if we shut down, or if we have to really pinch pennies, then that's not that's doing a disservice to the people that we're here to help in the first place. So, just trying to take some of those, aspects and lessons learned, with how we run FoodFinder is, even indicative of the fact that we want to bring really, for lack of a better way of saying it, a for-profit offering, a for-profit level of quality to an issue that is traditionally handled by nonprofit organizations that may be, on average, a little bit less tech savvy, a little bit sort of behind the curve. I've just noticed that it seems like there's almost like a 5 or 10 year lag time between where innovations hit, sort of the cutting edge of the for-profit world when they finally trickle down to the nonprofit world, and there are a couple reasons for that. But in my mind, it just doesn't make any sense, because when you think about it, the nonprofit sector is undoubtedly where technology has the greatest potential to meaningfully and transformatively improve people's lives. Yet it's also the realm in which it goes the most and most tragically underutilized in terms of employing technology to very long-standing, very macro societal issues. So FoodFinder, again, we're not really doing anything crazy. It's not rocket science, but we're just applying this pretty standard technology to an issue that's really as old as time, and trying to do our part to move the needle, on that same macro scale of making a meaningful difference in the fight against hunger overall.
Yeah, well said, and I love that. I mean, I think that's part of what really excites our team, is just how technology can really amplify impact. And of course, building technology is costly, right? But I think, to your point, in the scheme of things, the efficiency gains, and if it's done appropriately, the impact it can have is unbelievable. Again, to have really far-reaching effects on real people's lives. So that is great. One thing I wanted to ask you to expand upon, if you feel like you can, is, I have some familiarity, obviously, from knowing you and your team about how you all are, developing other revenue streams that, outside of grants and donations, which of course are very much needed, are helping you build a more sustainable model. Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, this is the part of our work that I'm the most excited about, and really I think has the most untapped potential for us to explore, at the very least here in 2021, and to keep the momentum going. So for our earned revenue model, I think that's certainly, again, sort of on the forefront of not viewing, nonprofits. You have the sort of the huge giants that, most people already know of, like, there's United Way, there's, even here in Atlanta, there's American Cancer Society, really the giants that have been around for decades, that even with sort of the traditional, grants, donations, have grown into billion-dollar organizations. But going forward, I am really excited about sort of the wave of innovation that is taking place in the nonprofit sector when it comes to viewing nonprofits as true social enterprises that are self-sustaining, that since day one have their mission baked into what they do, but are also getting increasingly creative in terms of how they fund their work and how they apply their work to, again, have that sort of synergistic, or really, the exponentially greater impact that they would have than maybe going something, through a traditional mean, or through something that's already been done before. So for FoodFinder, what that looks like for us is that starting in 2019, and this is honestly an idea that even I pitched at like pitch competitions at U of M when I was a student there, was thinking about how can we make our platform either, really honestly, both the front end and the back end. How can we make our platform available to other organizations that fight against hunger who are also in need of, facing the same problem of, if they're a food bank, if they're a school system, if they are a health system, or if they're just another foundation in the business of supplying food to those in need. How can we, satisfying the demand for food assistance being our specialty, how can we make our work and services available to them to not only, earn some money for us and our core operations of our website and app will always be free forever, not free to use and ad free on behalf of our main platforms. How can we not only sort of keep our lights on through these types of partnerships and collaborations, but if we make these happen, we can also help more food insecure families in the process. Like, that's the win-win scenario that we're all about, and we're trying to make happen all over the place. So, fast forward a year and a half to where we're at today, and we have several partnerships where we've done just that. It started with Food Lion in August of 2019. Food Lion Feeds is a great foundation up and down the East Coast. As really the nonprofit wing of the retailer Food Lion, we created for them basically a mini version of FoodFinder, a widget that they embedded into their website to help users find their closest food pantry based on where their closest Food Lion store was. So really, that's sort of the model one of either helping other organizations, have a custom, white label version of, their own version of FoodFinder to meet needs that wouldn't be met just by our core platforms. Anyone can just link our website or throw out the name of our tool or our app, for wherever and for free, and that's of course all fine and good. But the first model is creating this custom version that they can really be proud of, take ownership in, and meet specific needs that are unique to them. Or there's the second model of we could just license our backend. We can license our national database of food providers, which is the largest, highest quality data set of food providers that has ever been compiled. And we can make that available just for a really super simple, straightforward monthly fee. And we've been able to power some really cool tools, like with the Emerson Collective, the nonprofit founded by Steve Jobs' widow, out in the Bay Area, to power their help map that they put together for COVID-19 for about half of 2020 last year. Put all that together, that's 2020. As a result, and by a large margin, 2020 was the first year in our history where we actually got more income from these earned revenue partnerships than from grants and donations. And that was really awesome, because that's all unrestricted revenue that we can then use for whatever we need the most. So, like, pays for my salary, which I'm very appreciative of, because I still have student loans I need to pay off. We're getting closer and closer to that gold standard of having all earned revenue partnerships and API engagements. We can use that to pay for all of our operating expenses, all of our payroll expenses, and even expand our team. And then we can use the grants and donations, 100% of which can then all go towards the mission. And especially for regular people who want to join our work and who want to have a direct impact, they can rest easy knowing that 100% of their donation, and again, we're getting closer and closer to that milestone, so we're not there yet, but we're really on the precipice of it. They can rest easy knowing that their donation is having a really direct and really significant impact, and it's helping hundreds of families, thousands of families at a time all across the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love the attitude you alluded to earlier, which is, of course, there's no incentive to kind of be protective of the data you've built or feel like it's a zero-sum game. I mean, you're invested in the cause. So if you can get this in more people's hands, allow organizations to use it in a way that works well for their needs, incorporating their branding, all the better. And yeah, I definitely respect, that move towards being really a sustainable organization, because it's great for y'all. It's great for the people you're helping. I mean, it's obviously a win-win. I guess taking a step back, being a technology company, obviously I'm curious to revisit the tech side a little bit, mostly just related to your experience. We obviously talk to folks all the time that are thinking about launching some type of new digital product. And that's really, kind of our target listener for this podcast, people that are considering taking a leap, going through that journey, have an idea for a product that can help people. So for you, just want to know, like, what's been the hardest part, of launching a technology product? What are kind of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way over the last 7 or 8 years figuring that out, as far as web app, mobile app, programming languages, technical hurdles, bugs? I think we all know, I can say this sincerely, even being in the space, is building technology is not easy. It's a big undertaking. And there's always hiccups along the way. So I'll stop talking and let you answer, but I'm just curious, like, some of the hard lessons you've learned and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think to keep it short and sweet, sort of the hardest lesson we've learned is that the work is never done. There's always more things you want to either, of course, you have to have the resources to create the technology solution in the first place, to get it built from scratch and to get it off the ground. But then, of course, there's always, for FoodFinder itself, I think we're probably at this point that, total of V4 or V5 of total redesigns of FoodFinder's interface, constantly changing, constantly trying to improve our work. And again, sometimes something that you add or include to it, like that you think will improve your work, will actually like hurt something like somewhere else. So it's always, it's really a lot of learning by doing.
Mm-hmm.
But still, for trying to keep in mind that, getting started at all is better than trying to have the absolutely perfect solution, prepared out the gates. Because really, I think that experience of learning by doing, and then learning from firsthand users of, is this helpful? Is this solving a problem? Then that's sort of really the heart of where the directions you can use to guide your path forward. So we've been fortunate enough to, even where the distance between our users, or really I should say our beneficiaries, is greater than most nonprofits. We're not a brick and mortar operation at all. So we don't have in-person conversations with our users, but still we have countless stories of the folks that we've served more hands-on through people who have called us or emailed us directly. And oftentimes those folks are the ones who are in the toughest scenarios in terms of their personal circumstances and why they need help with food. It's a long journey, and we are coming up. This May will be the 7-year anniversary of FoodFinder's platform being live. So we've been in it for a while, and it's still, on one hand, it's like you can get down to yourself who says like, wow, we haven't done a lot. But on one hand, there is so much we have done, and there's so much more work left to be done. Is that I'd rather let that be sort of a motivator for me, mm-hmm. rather than a source of discouragement.
Yeah, totally. It's a great answer, and I totally agree with, I think, the first thing you said, which our team tries to communicate to folks is software is never done, and you kind of have to have that mentality, particularly stuff that's web-based, mobile-based. Those are just dynamic environments where things are always changing, whether that's, Apple changing terms in the App Store, or, a new device with different screen size. There's just always variables changing. So you have to kind of, even if overall the functionality is not evolving rapidly, just to kind of stay in line, there's ongoing work, right, to stay live and functional. So that's a good lesson. And obviously, I certainly agree that getting something out there, getting it in people's hands is the best way to learn. It's, of course, productive ahead of time to do your research, do true regimented user research. But until something is really live out there, it's all speculative. So you learn a ton quickly. Awesome. We'll also have one more question for you. So again, we know with the rise of COVID, you all's work has become that much more critical and obviously really ramped up in terms of the need. So looking more into the future, it's a big question, I guess, but where do you see things going with FoodFinder, and I know your work will never be done, but like, what does success look like for you all 5 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a twofold answer. The first is that FoodFinder's, ultimate goal, of course, unsurprisingly, is to be the first ever national database or national directory of every food pantry in America. So right now, we have the information of a little bit north of 46,000 full-time food providers in our database and on our systems map. So that's about 75%, approaching 80% of all food pantries in America. Of course, on one hand, people think it's 60,000. No one really knows for sure how many there are total in America, and that's sort of part of the problem that we're trying to solve. And even if we, never truly hit 100%, getting as close to 99.9% total nationwide coverage as possible, that's where not only just having, getting closer to that vision of that anywhere in America at any time of year, anyone can pull up FoodFinder and find where to get help with emergency food near them. That's what we strive for, and that's what we'll always continue to work to get as close to that ideal as we possibly can. But the second one, and I think that's more, I guess from a strategic perspective, is that our long-term goal is for FoodFinder to be institutionalized in America. Is that we want to be the go-to tool in the country for finding help with emergency food. So how that, what does that look like? That looks like FoodFinder being on the desktop of every school computer in the country. That's FoodFinder being widely known as a tool that's invaluable for social workers, for caretakers, for nurses and health providers who know that even as they are writing a prescription for a patient of theirs with chronic illness, chronic illnesses, but if they're from a low-income background, if they don't have even the food, the quality or quantity of food that they need to be healthy, and then it doesn't matter what medicine they take, because food is really the bare minimum for people to be healthy, for students to be well enough to come to school every day to learn effectively. And that's when you get even to, implementing policy. You start thinking about how do we use our work to start to break the cycle of poverty, just try and, break the links of intergenerational poverty. And the really, big deal stuff that is certainly, issues that we cannot solve wholly on our own, but then we can be we can be an increasingly important piece of that puzzle. And that's where, we'll never stop, trying to, going down that journey and, taking the steps to reach those really pretty huge ambitions. But for how many more millions of people that we can not only, connect to food pantries at any given time, because we really are an emergency resource. People use us when they need help, today, or they need help for their family, this week or this weekend. Not only can we get them help in emergency scenarios, we can help lift millions of food insecure families, during COVID and post-COVID. We can lift millions of Americans back up into lasting food security. And that's what we're here to do.
Awesome. Well, it's a very inspiring mission, and I know you all are already having a tremendous impact, and I know you'll get there for all of these the bigger vision too. I have no doubt. Well, great. So we're about out of time. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us. This has been really great. Again, I think FoodFinder is fantastic. Before we sign off, where can listeners go if they want to, use the tool or donate or follow you guys? We obviously want folks to support what you're doing.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for having us, and thank you for the plug. If what I've said has resonated with you or anyone listening, going just to foodfinder.us, just our main website, is the best way to donate. See in the top right corner, the big red donate button there, where you'll be taken to our portal. You can see even directly based on the donation level that you feel comfortable with, the impact that you'll have. Every $10 contributed to our mission helps connect 200 people across the country to free food providers, which is incredible. And yeah, absolutely. If you want to stay in touch with the very latest in our work, the very latest in our mission, give us a follow. At FoodFinder US is our handle for pretty much across the board. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn are the 4 big platforms we use. So yeah, give us a follow there. That's where we post updates, and we'll keep you in tune and keep you in touch with the impact that we're having month in and month out, and for all the really exciting initiatives we have on the horizon.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Jack. It's been great having you on the Digital Footprint, and we will keep in touch and follow you guys and keep up the good work.
For sure. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you for listening to The Digital Footprint. This show is brought to you by Tyrannosaurus Tech, an award-winning technology partner dedicated to designing and developing high-impact software products. If you like what you heard in this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For show notes and access to all episodes, please visit tyrannosaurustech.com/blog. Digital Footprint.